farcical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL Network.
Yes, that is right. Welcome, everybody, on in to the Saturday Night Network. My name is John from the SNN. So excited to be back with you from being sick last week. I missed 2 podcasts, and thanks for all the well wishes from all of the listeners. So I really appreciate all of that. But yeah, pumped to be here tonight for our next feedback show. This is the show that we do between each SNL cycle. So typically there'll be 2 or 3 episodes and then a break on the SNL schedule, and we will get together with some great friends of the show, including some patrons as well. Those are our paid subscribers who really support the Saturday Night Network, and they get to call in and answer your questions. We put out a form on social media to answer your questions. We got a ton of questions that we're going to get to tonight. So much going on in the SNL universe to talk through, and very excited to start off the show tonight with our friend Sammy K. So Sammy, how are you?
John, I'm doing well, buddy. We are here. We're here for the patron feedback show, and the Super Bowl was yesterday, so it was a lot of fun with some friends. We made some street corn for the event to go with my friend's tacos, so it was a swell time, and I'm happy to be here.
Yes. How much did you enjoy all the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift hype that was happening yesterday?
I think my favorite part was the whole, encounter that Travis Kelce had with the coach. I think that was exciting.
Oh, are you one of those people that's like, he is a misogynist?
No, I have like so little opinion on all of it. My biggest takeaway from Travis Kelce was a surprisingly good SNL host. I think I've said on this podcast I had no idea who he was until he was announced as an SNL host, but
the whole internet was waiting for just one moment to be like, see, we knew he was a bad guy, and that is
they got it.
Yes, guys. I have watched as much sports as anyone here on the SNN, and I could tell you, in the throws competition, people get heated. Bill Murray and Chevy Chase got into a fight backstage once upon a time. I'm like, there could be modern SNL fights we don't hear about. In the throws competition, things get heated, so that's what happens. But anyways, it was all good. They won. It was great. Did you see Usher perform? Former SNL musical guest Usher perform last night?
Yeah, that was like the main way that that I was able to sit through kind of all of it, because people at home may not know that I'm from Detroit. So honestly, like this whole Super Bowl, the whole thing was kind of deflated when the Lions didn't make it to the Super Bowl. So I wasn't super engaged in the game. I feel like a lot of people in my Super Bowl party, bigger sports fans, weren't so engaged in the first half of the game. But the Usher performance I thought was good. I've seen some mixed reviews on it.
I loved it.
I also loved it. I also love that you and I are around the same age. We're now the target demo for like the Super Bowl halftime show almost, or like as far as like advertisers go, and where all the money gets spent. So like, we're getting Usher, we're getting Rihanna, we're getting like all the hip hop stars, from 2 years ago, like Snoop Dogg and everything. So it's cool that now we're old and all of the halftime shows are geared towards us, which is very fun.
Everyone thinks you don't want to get older, and then they make the Super Bowl halftime shows for
you. That is
the
only thing. That and Social Security are the 2 perks of getting older.
100%. Yes. Usher, former 3-time musical guest with Lindsay Lohan in 2004, then with Steve Carell in 2008, and then with Will Ferrell in 2012. So stopped going every 4 years. But yeah, Usher had some great performances in Saturday Night Live. Also last night brought out Alicia Keys and Lil Jon and Ludacris and will.i.am. It was just great. It was a great night. So I had a great weekend. Feeling all better. I'm very excited to talk about what's happening in the SNL world. So we're going to have some special guests joining us in just a bit, Sammy. But before we do that, I would love to know from you. There's a lot happening over the last few weeks in Saturday Night Live. We are talking about the Jacob Elordi episode, Dakota Johnson, Ayo Edebiri. And I just felt like every week we are jam-packed with both good and bad storylines. The SNL community was on one the last few weeks. So
yeah.
Where's your head at now? How are you feeling about season 49 and just like everything that's going on? I'm sure we're going to get into all the details throughout the show, but how you feeling?
Yeah. I'm still feeling pretty positive overall on the season. I do feel like we've hit a bit of a rough patch, and with like this kind of last string of episodes. The Ayo episode I really liked, on the Hot Take Show. I, really enjoyed it. But also, that's the Ayo episode. So it would have been kind of hard to, in my eyes, kind of botch that. But I'm overall feeling positive. I am very interested to see what is going to happen with the Shane Gillis episode. I'm not going to touch on too much of it right now because I know we have a lot of questions, that have come in about that. But I think in this next run of episodes, I think we'll really kind of get a sense of where this current iteration of the show is at. And I think we can really finish strong heading towards, season 50. But it's you can't really sugarcoat it. I thought the Elordi episode was not great. And I was more positive on the Dakota Johnson episode than most, but still kind of mid. But, I think there's still been a lot of great stuff from the season. It is just interesting kind of to see, where the writers are kind of trying to take things, or, who's getting screen time and everything like that. I still don't feel like I have a full grasp of where we're at, if that makes sense.
So I've been thinking about this a lot, and when I was sick, I had an opportunity to just like reflect, right? Because I'm just like always in like the SNL motion of like what's coming up next, and I was like, I think in the 49-year history of the show, SNL has never been more of an ensemble than it is right now. There's like nobody on the cast that's like a major star in the traditional sense. If you think about like, top 50 cast members of all time, like that was a huge theme for the fall. Like right now, like we said, like, Ego and Bowen are sort of borderline. I think you have to put Mikey Day like squarely in there. Probably in the back end of it, but still in the top 50 for sure. And then like Keenan's a top 10 cast member, obviously legacy, longevity, and has had some really like, great seasons in the last few years. But like, there's no like star of the show. Like if you asked any casual person who kind of watched SNL like 5 years ago and has been on and off, like who the star of the show is right now, I don't think they would tell you. And like, I think that's a problem because I think people like JAJ, people like Sarah, they have a Marcelo. There's a lot of really talented people on the show, and they could be like, this could be, it could be a Will Ferrell era where they just push somebody who is so strong and makes episodes really great. It could be like a Kate and Cecily era where they do that. But I just think they don't have an identity of the show right now. And maybe it worked last year when like Mikey Day really rose to the occasion, but he sort of like come back to the mean. And I just don't know that anybody has stepped up this year to like take the show for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and is also kind of along the lines of something I've been thinking about recently, like with this season, where I think on the one hand, like having, more of an emphasis on the ensemble can be a good way in some things. Like, you're getting, maybe like a lot of at bats, for, some of the cast members to be able to try things, but there almost feels like there's not a ton of cohesion with this cast itself. I feel like, there feel like I'm not getting the vibes of, and maybe, I have rose colored glasses for our era of the show, when we were in high school or whatever. But, the Bill Hader, Kristen Wiig cast really felt like, there was like some sort of camaraderie or cohesion. And I'm not necessarily getting that right now. And that is kind of like a qualitative thing, with the show that, maybe I'm putting too much weight on, but there is some sort of it factor, and maybe it could be star power that is also, playing into the element of it, but there is some kind of intangible thing that I feel like is missing right now. And I do feel like, looking ahead to season 50, like we need to, I'm sure the show really wants to get to a place where, they have that.
Yeah, I want to bring our friend Will into the conversation right now. So let me bring him up on stage. Will, how you doing, man?
Doing well, John. Glad you're feeling better. Good to see you, Sammy.
Hey, Will.
Thank you so much. Great to see you. So, we're just deep into this conversation, which, I would love your input on, Will. But, I think that I see a lot of people in the chat saying like they like the ensemble feeling of the show. And Sammy, I agree with you. I do think that like perhaps like the era that you're talking about with Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig was an ensemble that worked. All of those cast members in that era were probably like top 25 cast members in the history of the show. Like that, and it also really worked because there was way less cast members. I think it's really hard to have an ensemble when you have 17 cast members. Like if you're gonna go that big, you got to have a couple stars. So I'm not, and like for all of our friends of the show, I'm not saying that you aren't stars. I'm just saying that the way the show is using you doesn't put you in a position to make you a star. And I think that's a little bit of a problem. But let's get Will's thoughts on all this, because I think we're having a really fascinating discussion here.
Yeah, no, John, I was listening, and I think I agree with you. I think in terms of the way the cast is being used, it definitely does have an ensemble feel. And personally, as a fan, I do prefer when they utilize more of the cast. I think the cast has obviously in the last few years been more diverse, and it's given ways for more pathways to find more comedy and different things that they might not have tapped into in years past. But I do think that right now, I think some of the writing hasn't utilized the way that they want to in that ensemble way, the ways that it can, or the ways that I think it could in a perfect world. But I think it is kind of an interesting mix because there aren't those. There's a lot of great people on the show. I think the show is still trying to define how they want to use everyone, which is not allowing people to kind of rise to the top or kind of be into specific roles on the show that are consistent. But I think that there's still time. It's obviously they haven't been together for too long, some of them. But I just think that that's just kind of how they're doing it right now. And hopefully they'll let someone rise to the top and be able to find some more star power, or at least in some way, some stronger writing that can kind of utilize people in different ways that are more consistent to get them some more time.
For sure. But the other thing, Will, is like last season, we had the same cast, maybe like, plus Cecily for a few episodes, minus Chloe Trost, the same writers for the most part. And I still believe season 48 was a above average season of the show in its history. I just wonder if the reason it was so good was because there were cast members who were on hot streaks and they masked some of the issues that we may be seeing now. For example, Sarah Sherman had a crazy hot streak for a few episodes in the middle of the season. And then Mikey Day like blew us out of the water with some sketches back to back weeks. And we were like, oh, the show is cooking. Like all we needed to do was get rid of Kate and Cecily and 80. And now we get to see the true stars form. But like, I just haven't seen, I haven't come to the podcast week after week and been like, oh, this person is crushing it every single week. And that is a problem as an SNL fan, I feel.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd love to hear Sammy's thoughts though, too, before I hop in again.
Yeah, I guess I do wonder if it's, I mean, I don't think there's one sort of issue with the show right now, but I do really feel like the writing hasn't necessarily suited this cast super well in this season, maybe compared to last season. And I do kind of go back to maybe just everything with the writer's strike, just kind of having that delay and everything like that. Maybe things, but at the same time, I felt pretty good about the Pete episode and the Bad Bunny episode and the Nate Bargatze episode. So, I guess like I can't really blame it all on the strike, but I do feel like the writing hasn't necessarily played to the cast's strengths recently. And yeah, I don't know. And like you said, John, the writing staff hasn't changed a ton. So it is a big question mark, and I don't know if, if there's stuff behind the scenes that is, causing, I don't want to speculate, like maybe just something about the vibes.
I don't think that they think the show is bad right now. And I personally, like, I'll just put out there, I don't think the show is bad right now. Like, I think that Jacob Elordi was one of the worst episodes we've ever covered on the show. And I'm not afraid to say it. I don't think Dakota Johnson and Ayo's episodes of the show were bad episodes of Saturday Night Live. I'm just saying, like, when we sit here in like June, July, and August and talk about what season 49 was, I think we're going to have a hard time describing like our thoughts on the season. Like it's just much easier to categorize season 46, 47, and 48 that we've all covered here. 49 to me is still a little bit of a mystery of what they're trying to do on the show.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, to your point, John, the way that they approached the show, it seemed like last year, maybe it helped because they had some veterans that were on the show, but it's almost like I feel sometimes like they approach the cast the same way they do the hosts, where it's like, let's just kind of approach this week fresh. Let's just kind of see what we have, and we'll plug and play people where we need to throughout the week. If someone has a strong update piece, we'll go to that. some stuff that they've had strong this year kind of goes back to the well of previous seasons, or like, relying on different things. But it seems like every week they have an idea, writing wise, and then they kind of plug everyone into that versus, I don't know, feeling like everyone has their specific, not to pigeonhole people, but I don't feel like when everyone someone shows them a sketch, I'm like, I don't know what they're going to be doing or what their roles going to be playing. And they're just kind of there to feed the sketch versus writing to everyone's strengths. It feels like to me so far this season, which makes it feel very uneven week to week.
It's also possible, like, they're like a restaurant that like has too much on the menu. Like they have, like, they're serving like Chinese food and sandwiches and pizza. Like they don't know what, like, that's the thing is like every week they're like, okay, how do we get Ego in a sketch? How do we get PDD on the show? Like, how do we do this? And then ultimately it just comes down to like what the host kind of wants, like what the vibe of their show is going to be. Like Ayo, obviously, like, like her sketch sensibility matched with certain cast members more than others. Like that's what it was. So like, but I just think you have like, they would say it's a good problem that you have too much material, but like I think that the show for decades always had a voice. It may not have always been a good voice, but they always had a voice. And right now I'm a little bit confused about what they're trying to show me.
Maybe this is the Cheesecake Factory season. Just have a very, very long menu.
Big menu.
And just big
like,
menu.
Will, if I asked you right now, like, what do you think the Shane Gillis episode is going to be like? Like, you'd be like, how the hell would I know?
Yeah, you're right up. The wheels are spinning right now. And I'm like, I honestly have no idea. And I mean, even to that point, it's a lot of the interest there is what is Shane going to do? As someone who's never hosted the show before, and there's obviously a lot of backstory with him, there's still so much more thinking about what he's going to do and what he's going to bring versus, oh, this is going to be a great episode for such and such to share or prepare with him, or I can see them utilizing this person more, or just the voices, like I said, are kind of all over the place.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, I think this was like a really fascinating discussion to start off the show with. We have a lot of questions to get into, so let's get into them and we'll talk through some of these other details tonight. So this first question comes in from our friend Monette, and Monette says, would you rather Taylor Swift? All right, we're doing this already. Okay. Would you rather Taylor Swift be the musical guest with Travis Kelce, an unrelated host like the last 3 times that Taylor was the musical guest, or for her to do double duty for her upcoming new album? Do you think SNL should lean into her popularity or her fan base, or instead stop chasing trends with the talent booking? So this is, to summarize, Monette is asking about the big, $1 billion question of like, will SNL get Taylor Swift to host the show this season? Sammy, what do you think they want to do? What do you think they will do?
I mean, I think ultimately what they want to do, I think they would want him to do double duty, honestly. You can sell the entire episode around Taylor Swift, and I think their second choice would be the Travis Kelce pairing. I do feel like it feels a little early to bring him back. I thought he was a solid host, but I don't know if he's a host that you need to see every year, but at the same time, it is kind of chasing a viral trend. So I could see them wanting to do that, but I'm not a big Taylor Swift fan or a fan really at all, but I think the show definitely should try to get her to do double duty. It's kind of crazy that she's only hosted one time. And if there was any time to do it, I'm not going to say if there was any time to do it, it's now, but like she's never been, bigger than she is right now. And, maybe next year she'll be too big. I don't know. It almost feels like she's too big, but I think it would be fascinating, so many years after her first appearance as a host on the show to see her back.
Yeah. So my 2 cents on this, Will, is like, I don't think in modern times there's ever been somebody like with as much general popularity as Taylor Swift. Like this is like, like when the Beatles were like the most popular people in the world back in the 60s. It was like, if you could get the Beatles to like perform in your city, like your city is just like, it changes the whole economy of your city. And that's what's happening with Taylor right now. And in a world where media is so like, there's so many options to view things, it's incredible that there's this person that exists. I think every TV show that exists, every podcast that exists would give up anything to get Taylor Swift to come on their show. So like, I just think it's like whatever they can get. Like they don't care, right? Because like people will watch as much as they'll watch the Super Bowl. They'll watch SNL if Taylor hosts.
Yeah, I mean, she's obviously one of the most famous people in the world right now. And so I think if you're doing talent booking and you haven't made a call to one of her, I'm sure, many assistants, you're not really doing your job. I think if you're going to bring people into the fold, I mean, we're all obviously super fans here, and I think we all want the show to do well and to grow and get more eyes on it, especially when we feel like it's doing really well. No better way than to have one of the most famous people in the world be on the show. I think to the question, I would love to see her come back. I think it'd be fun. I think especially as a musical guest, I mean, to promote for her new album, I think I would prefer to see her with a different athlete pairing. I would honestly rather see like a Peyton Manning come back with Taylor Swift. I think that they could, have fun with something like that with, and you could still, I'm sure there'll still be gratuitous Travis cameos throughout that episode too, if she were to come back regardless. But I think, strike while the iron is hot, and the iron's been hot for a while and continues. So if she says yes, I don't see why anyone would turn that down.
Yeah, so I think if I'm going to make a prediction right now, I think they'll make the ask. I don't think they'll do it because I just think that they're going to have too many opportunities, too many things are going on. Maybe they want to step away from the spotlight just for a little bit. I think they're going to ask Patrick Mahomes to host SNL. And then the speculation will be, will they show up? And maybe they will. Maybe they'll at least, maybe they'll just be there and go to the after party. But like that may be the prudent move, because then you get the eyeballs on the show. The show could be pretty decent with Mahomes as the host, and you don't have to worry about like the craziness that might ensue with having them together on that show. I don't know. Sammy, what do you think of that?
I mean, I think if he was hosting, they would definitely show up, because they showed up, earlier this season together, and it wasn't like a connection, that necessarily like made a ton of sense. It was the Pete episode, right? Was when they showed up.
Yeah, it was the Pete episode where they did a sketch about. Yeah, they just sketch about the obsession with everybody in football and them, and then obviously Kelsey shows up at the end of it, and then Taylor intros Ice Spice, who you saw together last night at the in that box watching.
Yeah. No, if he.
By the way,
host,
sorry.
Yeah.
Speaking of Ice Spice, let me just say, Sean Grant. Yeah, I don't know if anyone was watching the Super Bowl, but our podcaster, our main man, Sean Grant, was in a commercial with Ice Spice. So
crazy.
Hilarious.
Amazing. Shout out to Sean.
Yes.
No, if Patrick Mahomes was the host, I think they would definitely show up. Like, obviously they would, like, I don't think they're, I mean, maybe after the Super Bowl win, they'll, be away from, the limelight for a little bit, but she's like about to roll out an album. So I don't really think that's the case. So I think if he's hosting in the next couple of weeks, if he were the host, they would definitely show up.
Yeah. I think, like, look, we got to start the speculation. Like, we don't have it two hosts right now after the Shane Gillis episode. The wait is on. Like, can SNL pull this off? If they can pull this off, this to me is a bigger feat than, Lauren putting up $3,200 and being like, we're going to have the Beatles come. Like, we're going to ask you guys to come. We'll give $800 to Ringo or whatever. Like, this would be massive if you can make this happen.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, can I ask, are you saying if she appears as like a host or musical guest at all, or if they get the pairing of the two of them?
Oh, they get the pairing. That's like going to Vegas and winning the lot. Like, that's like winning all your, like,
I see what you're trying to do with that comparison, John, but she was on the show like 3 years ago. Like,
but she wasn't this big.
Yeah, but she was still big. Like, I don't know.
But the concert tour this summer, like, just elevated her stature to, like, she could save the world. Like, she could swing elections, like, that's the type of thing that we're talking about here. So
right.
It's just
bring her in November.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have more questions to get to. We have Fred, who's going to come on next. But Will, do you want to stick around? Like, I'm feeling kind of loose tonight. So if you want to hang out, you're welcome to.
Of course. Happy to do it.
All right.
It's that
let's
long
do that.
COVID.
Yes, exactly. So let me bring in Fred. We'll have a big party here on the SNN. We'll bring in Fred. So hey, Fred.
What's going on? The four of
How
us.
you doing?
Hey, Will. Hey, Sammy. Hey, John.
Hey, Fred.
Yes, Fred. You don't mind? We'll keep Will around a little bit. We'll hang out and talk about Saturday Night Live. So okay. So I think that's it for the Travis Kelce questions. Let's move on to this next question that comes in from our friend Blood Meridian. Always sends in a little bit of a long question, so bear with me. I'll try my best to get through it. But basically says, Blood says, while I've enjoyed the season as a whole myself, the recent run has not only disappointed me, but has also shown me a sort of surrendering by the writers who seem to have like no identity and some confusing sketches, as well as the cast as a whole. And it's easily my least favorite run since the early to mid 2000s. with stronger, more versatile performers like JAJ, Ego, and Tros not being used as much as their potential could allow, in favor of a tiered cast system of select stars that offer nothing but derivative and dull humor, according to Blood. What is your best way to fix the cast writer problems moving forward, and whom could form a strong backbone to the cast post 50? So basically, Blood is seeing a lot of the same things that we did talk about earlier on in the show. So Fred, I'm not sure if you were listening into the beginning of the show, but basically we were feeling like show is missing a little bit of an identity right now. How are you feeling about the show right now?
Yeah, so that was actually something I wanted to touch upon. I have 2 questions for the 3 of you. One is, do you think part of this truly ensemble approach is kind of a safe approach entering season 50? And it's like deliberate in a way that there's not somebody like truly standing out or what have you, because eventually they're going to have to, they don't want like somebody leaving into 50 and then they're in a tough spot, or also like transitioning past 51, hopefully assuming we get there. And then like, also just, is it just truly, if we had rearranged all of the hosts up until now, like, would we be having this conversation? Which I know is, you know, easier to pose than not, but I think like the first stretch was quite good. And I wonder if you could have, if like Nate was 2 weeks ago and, you know, you kind of mixed it around, then like, would we even be talking like this? Because I think everyone felt pretty bullish about the first stretch before the new year.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first on this, which is like, I don't think it's a host problem. I do think if you have a very good, like we had some really strong hosts show up to the show this year in Emma Stone and Adam Driver, and I don't think their episodes lived up to their potential as hosts. So for me, it's not really a problem of like the order of the hosts. I just think like everything was clicking. I think the writers felt fresh. They were, you know, had some good ideas that maybe that they were knowing. And Andrew even said this, they knew that like Nate Bargatze is coming into the building before the season started. So they're like, okay, this is a sketch that I have a really good idea for, and I'm going to hold it for Nate. Now that we're, you know, 12 episodes into the season, they can't plan ahead as much. So things are really, their feet are put to the fire. So it's just a little bit of a different circumstance, in my opinion. Sammy, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah. I'm kind of with you on this. I feel like on paper, you look at all the hosts and I feel like they all like totally make sense from a booking perspective. Like maybe you could like put a question mark on Dakota Johnson, but like, you know, because of her first episode, but Jacob Elordi is like such like a rising star and everything like that. So yeah, I don't know if it's just, you know, having energy towards the beginning of the season and something's maybe kind of not clicking or dying out as much, but I'm not sure. And Fred, can you remind me what your first question was?
I mean, it wasn't even a question. It was more just like, like I wonder also like if like there's no like standout cast members right now, like if it's intentional in a way, because you wouldn't want to risk somebody leaving into 50, and like presumably we all hope like the hosts are going to be standout. So as long as like it's consistent, you're like feeling out how everyone's doing, then you'll be in a safer spot next year.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting theory, but I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily in the show's best, you know, in having the show's best intentions, if that is like a deliberate decision. You know, I think ultimately, especially going into what is going to be like the most widely viewed probably season in the show's history and celebrated, you know, in the show's history, you want to make sure that you're set up, you know, to kind of live up to that. You don't want, you know, to have this big celebration and, you know, people be all excited for SNL 50 and all, you know, the kind of celebration around that. And then the actual season 50 is like mid, you know? So I don't think I think it's not an intentional decision.
Well, what do you
think?
think?
I'm sure they're not hoping for it to be mid. It's just not working.
I hope not.
The strategy.
I would agree. I think that they, I don't think they'd be intentional I think the way they're using the cast, I don't think there's anything, they're playing chess in a new way. I think they're just kind of using the cast how they see fit. But I think it'd be Lauren's preference. I think it'd be the fans' preference that they had stars and they could have people they could bank on going into season 50. I think even if there was someone who had like risen and we considered them to be like the star, there are a few stars of the show. I think unless there's some crazy, career waiting for you on the other side of SNL, I think that is the dream to be going into season 50. There's going to be so many people coming back. There's going to be so many guest writers, so many big hosts. I think coming in season 50, I can't see anyone deciding I want to leave it after 49 and not be around to witness that and be a part of it. So I think right now it's just the ensemble feel could help them maybe in some ways because there'll probably be a lot of stunt casting and things in season 50, but I still think the preference would be to have maybe a little less options and to hopefully have a few people rise to the ranks where they're drawing people in between hosts week to week.
Yeah, Fred, like I think that Lorne has done an excellent job hiring new cast members in the last few years. Like if we're going to applaud anything that the show has done, is that like JJ and Sarah in season 47, season 48's newbies, like Marcelo has a lot of potential. We've seen Longfellow. I've seen some really good things from Molly, and especially Devin the last few episodes has been fantastic. I think Mike talked about that on By the Numbers. And then this season with Chloe Charles, like these are really good SNL prospects. So they're the talent they're bringing in is fantastic. The question is like for people, and I'll start with these three, like Marcelo, JJ, and Sarah, to me, like in any era of the show could be a star. Are they ready to hand the reins over to them when you have people like Ego and Heidi and Chloe, who were sort of like in the mix, waiting to, rise for so long, and now's their opportunity, and they're worried that they're going to end up being like part of a lost generation, so they're pushing their stuff on the show, and they're sort of not letting the younger people take over the show. So it's like, I just think it is a little bit of it could ultimately be a long-term consequence of the previous era staying so long on the show that the seniors now are not letting the newbies take over the show. Does that make sense?
No, it does. And that's a great point. It's just, I also feel like the seniors are also at the same time though, like taking a step back. Like I feel like Keenan's not like running the show as much as he used to be, or like Mikey, like Ego, Heidi, like they're still very prominent, but they're trying their best to kind of hold it back. So it's a very tough spot to be in. I mean, I don't have the answer. I was just trying to pose, like, what could it be?
For sure. And that is another really fascinating storyline of the last few years, which is that Keenan had this like late era, dominance that nobody expected. And now he's sort of come back to what he was in the middle of his career, which is really just a utility player that might have some episodes where he pops or doesn't. And that is also to the detriment of the show. So I just think the show is like working against a lot of things here. But yeah, there were some really enjoyable moments over the last two episodes that I'm sure we'll get to talk about. I want to take this next question that came from Ike Moore, our friend Ike, who asks, I know he's a big Timberlake fan like myself. So he says, if Timberlake had done the Omeletville sketch, so that's the sketch where he dresses in a mascot and then he does like a little back and forth with somebody else. What songs would you have him do? I'm thinking like Tyla's Water, Lil Uzi Vert's I Just Want to Rock, maybe some Justin Bieber Peaches, and some NSYNC Dirty Pop. So, Sammy, do you have any thoughts here on if you would have gotten the mascot from JT, what would you want to see? Yeah.
Well, I think if an episode had aired, well, I guess the episode was before the Grammys, but had it aired around the Grammys, you could have done the Travis Scott Playboy Cardi song Fiend, when Travis Scott's like got the chair and he's like destroying the set and everything like that. That would have been, kind of more intense for them. And then another one I wrote down was the Billie Eilish song from Barbie, What Was I Made For? Just like a very, kind of serious ballad from them. So yeah, those were some ideas I had.
Well,
yeah, I was actually going to say the same one, the Barbie one. I think that'd be Justin have some fun with that one. And then I think maybe Paint the Town Red by Doja Cat. You probably have fun with that one too. Those are the two that come to mind off the top of my head, though.
Yeah, Fred, I was just give me your thoughts. Do you have any?
No. I mean, you can move away if you want. I mean, the only song I could think of was the Barbie one, and now it's like overdone. So.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that I would have loved to have seen in this sketch that I haven't seen already, and I used to love this sketch because like I'm a big music fan, and this like just hits on all levels for me. The only thing that I wanted to see in this sketch that I wouldn't have seen before was if he brought out the rest of NSYNC in mascots, and then they did some NSYNC. I think that would have like blown up the internet a little bit. So, Yeah, that was my 2 cents on it, Ike.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, you ready to get into this? We have some interesting questions coming up here. So this is a topic we haven't really talked about yet. So from our friend, let's start. I'll read a couple questions and then we'll sort of, because they'll all be around the same topic. So first came from our friend at Looking Glass World on Instagram, asked us thoughts on Shane Gillis hosting. Then our friend Matthew asked, controversy aside, how do you think the Shane Gillis show will turn out? Personally, I felt the episode hosted by stand-ups this year have been better. Also taking into factor he's friends with a lot of the writing staff makes me think it could be one of the more enjoyable episodes. So Brendan Keller also asked, I was watching the show during the original Shane Gillis fiasco and was pro not hiring him at the time. Now, so many years later, he's finally going to step onto the SNL stage, whether we like it or not. Outside of what you've heard of him, have you watched any of his specials? Because I did, and I actually found them pretty funny. So I figure we can take some of these questions and sort of just let's have the Shane Gillis conversation here. So just letting you all know, I did go full in on my thoughts on this booking on our previous patron show. So if anybody listened to the SNN sketch breakdown from last week, I did talk about my 2 cents on it. I'll just summarize overall thoughts, which is for me, John, and I'll speak just for John, no one else here at the SNN. I was certainly uncomfortable with what they found from Shane Gillis's previous podcast when they hired him. I'm not like, I don't love the types of situations like Shane Gillis and like athletes when they get drafted into professional sports league that you start like combing through all their old stuff. And then you're like, see, like they're actually like racist. Like, you know, like there's like that makes me uncomfortable. The idea that people are like looking into people's past all the time for everything, but because it's not our job, that's NBC's job. Right. And as much as I love our friends over at NBC, it was an indictment on them that they didn't clean up the stuff from Shane Gillis and teach them how to do proper media training. Also be a better person. Now saying all of that, like, do I think that people have the opportunity to change? Yeah. I mean, I do. I think that he should have a conversation with Bowen Yang if he hasn't already had one. Yes, I think he should. Because the last thing we want, even in a competitive environment like Saturday Night Live, is for people to go to work and feel uncomfortable. And I think we can all agree on this podcast and all the people who are watching the show that, like, as much fun as we have with the show, the last thing we would want to hear is that a cast member went to work throughout the week at NBC and felt extremely uncomfortable by the situation. So I'm hoping that this booking was made in good taste and that everyone is okay over there. And I don't know that we really know anyone's true feelings unless they tell us, but I'm hoping that everything's okay and that we're going to end up having a very good show, because to the questioner's point, Shane Gillis is very well connected to Saturday Night Live and very well suited to have a very good show. So, Sammy, thoughts?
It's kind of hard to follow that because it was so well spoken. I'm going to try my best.
No pressure.
Yeah, I think it's still just a fascinating booking. I think I've talked about this with you, John, and some friends, that this was rumored, speculated over the last couple of weeks before it was announced, and I really didn't buy it. I kind of almost bought more that Lauren would ask him to host than for him to accept, just because almost like a F you to the show. But it seems like that is not his attitude towards it, which is interesting. I do really hope, like you said, that behind the scenes, there isn't anything that going into the show is going to make it weird, because not only is that it's not fun to go to work when there's stuff like that going on, but it's ultimately, I think, would not lead to a good show if there isn't cohesion behind the scenes with everything. And then as far as his comedy and stuff goes, I have friends that have shown me their stand-up specials and sketches over the years, and he honestly is really funny. Like his sketches specifically, like he I think he's primarily known for his stand-up, and a lot of times that can't translate over to SNL, but he's done like a lot of great sketch work. I do want to highlight some of them from YouTube. Blind Guy Ruins Wedding is very funny. The mattress sketch is very funny. So I think this will be an interesting show, because it's almost like we're going to be seeing like an alternate universe of like what SNL could have been like today had Shane Gillis, not done that and made those comments and was on SNL, and maybe he wouldn't have lasted this long. But we're talking about how SNL has a star problem. He's going to be supposedly the star of this episode as the host. So I think just from an SNL fan perspective and like a historian on it all, I'm just very interested, and I am excited to see how it goes. But I think ultimately, as long as everyone's going into the episode feeling, okay about it, I think that will lead to a good show.
Will, Fred, any of you want to jump at this one?
I could start, Will, if that's cool. No, I agree with you, Sammy. Like he's going to be the star of that episode, and it's very interesting. Like he has quite the following, so it's going to draw in like definitely some eyes. And I think it's very bold of the show to ask him back. But if he's made amends and like no one feels uncomfortable, then I think it's going to be really interesting and like neat to watch. Like I'm very curious to see like how he addresses it. I feel like he totally should and needs to. And then if he hasn't made amends with everyone's not comfortable. Like I do wonder, and I'm sure you'll talk about this, John, in a few weeks, like which cast members maybe are more comfortable working with him and shine more, and like what kind of an episode that will create, which could be kind of strange to watch. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting booking, and it could either like kind of like after like the last three kind of help the show kind of dig itself out, if that's how everyone felt, or kind of continue making things worse, depending on like the vibe, I think, on the show.
Will, what do you think about all this?
Well, I think you've all made some great points, and John, I agree with everything that you said too. I think it's really an interesting booking. I am excited to see the show. I mean, I'm really curious. I think having stand-ups come back, we saw with the Nate Bargatze episode, right? I think stand-up monologues are among my favorites. I think that those usually just knock it out of the park, typically, whenever you have someone come back, and him having the stage literally to be able to, introduce some of the SNL world to him, that, as he comes back, his fans coming in to watch the show, kind of seeing that alternate universe play out in front of us, seeing how he chooses to address it. Because I think in a perfect world, it's an episode where, you do see someone who addresses this situation. It's kind of like people, both sides he got a chance to grow. He's had success throughout the show. He gets to come back and show what it could have been. And maybe it starts a partnership moving forward. I think as a small amends to what you're saying too, John, like to double down on it. I think with the platform the show has given to, like Chappelle and him coming back and some of his content, I think they probably aren't in a position to I guess say who like to I guess gatekeep who they will and will not, because if they will have Chappelle come on, and obviously saw it series like with Bowen and stuff during Good Nights or whatever, like they're open to having people on and letting people express themselves however they wish off the show. But I am curious to see how that plays out, and I think he really has nothing to lose in a lot of ways. I mean, he can come on and he could do poorly, and people will say, well, he wished him on the show anyway, but he still has success off the show. He can come there and knock out the park and say, hey, this is what it would have looked like with, if I was on the show, and really have a kind of no holds barred, like no fear approach to it. And maybe that gives everyone else some permission to loosen up and find a different kind of voice they haven't had in a while without worrying about the consequences. So hopefully it's a good pathway for the end of the season.
Yeah, I think we also have to keep in mind, like the timeline for the people who work at the show with this type of news is very different for us in the SNL fan universe, where like they may have known that Shane Gillis was going to host the show for months. So like, I don't know that it's like, oh, one thing after another, like Chappelle shows up and then Nikki Haley shows up and then they announce like that's like, it's us. It's easy for us to say that because it's all happening to us like on screen success, like in succession. But I don't know that like they weren't prepared for the situation, nor that Shane Gillis like isn't good with almost everybody at the show. So I just want to like be, careful about that. Like we can hold both things. We can say that like we are concerned based on the things that we've heard or known about, that we want everybody to like be able to go to work and be happy. And then we can also say that this is maybe one of the most fascinating bookings in modern SNL history, because as Sammy said, we're seeing an alternate universe where what happens if Shane Gillis was let onto the cast to be a cast member there. And I can tell all of you guys, like last season, one of the big things we were talking about week after week on these feedback shows was SNL was missing in their cast a prototypical Shane Gillis type, right? Like that was like, everyone was like, okay, we don't have like that alpha dude that can be in sketches and work off of all the other types we have in the cast. So like Shane Gillis is that guy. And that is why like all the sketches might click on that weekend. And for some people, they're not going to be too thrilled about it, but we could have a great show. So what do you think of that, Fred?
Yeah, I mean, it's very possible for quite a while now. They have like all these sketches in their back pocket where like they needed a host quite like him. That isn't like Jacob Elordi either, or like Momoa, but like is gonna like fit so well, and like they can throw that all at him. But I think you made a good point. You're right. Like we shouldn't assume the worst, and I do hope everyone's gelling well, and it's a great show. So yeah, I think he's gonna fit a type that we've been looking for a while.
Yeah, personally, I'm like I said, I'm excited for it because unless like we get a whole like tell all from somebody who works at the show that they're like, okay, this week was a disaster, or we see like after the show that people didn't show up in sketches or weren't there to write during the week. And like there is literally zero indication that is happening from anybody right now. All the Bowen stuff with Nikki Haley, like that was no indication that it had anything to do with Shane Gillis, or that even that Bowen Yang has any problem with SNL right now. So we don't know. And then like once we do, we can have that conversation, but I don't think we're there yet to say like the Shane Gillis week is going to be a disaster. I think we're better set up for a good SNL week than we were with Elon Musk or Donald Trump. So
yeah,
obviously.
And for sure.
And to add on to what you're saying, John, like I was about to like bring those two figures as a comparison. You know, Shane Gillis is a comedian, and like this show is filled with comedians. He's like a contemporary of a lot of these people on the show, maybe not Keenan because he's been around for so long, but I think there is a bit where you have, you know, a comedian to come host the show. Like there is a bit more of a maybe understanding, or, you know, knowing like, okay, you're going to try a joke on stage and it's not going to land, or you're going to say something on the podcast and, you know, whatever. Like I think there is a little bit more of that sort of understanding. You know, maybe, I mean, I can kind of relate. I think Haskell might have said this when he was talking about the subject on the roundtable, where it's like sometimes when I'm on this podcast, I'm like, you know, what did I say about this sort of thing and whatnot. So I think, you know, from a comedian's, you know, point of view, you know, I think there is understanding there. So I think it will be a good show. I'm excited, and I hope it really energizes. If it is a good show, I hope it energizes, you know, the cast, you know, going forward, you know, for the rest of the season.
Now, what do you think is going to happen in the monologue, guys? Like, are we going to get some addressing of the situation, or are we going to get traditional stand-up? Will, like, if you had to make a prediction right now.
That's a great question. I do think there's going to be some traditional stand-up, because I think it's going to be in his best interest to kind of show that he is funny and is a talented stand-up. I think that's got to be priority one, to introduce himself to the SNL audience. And I do think there will probably be, maybe not to the same degree, but I kind of am looking for, you know, a Norm Macdonald monologue vibe from when he came back after he was fired from the show, where it's kind of like you just kind of address it, and maybe he doesn't attack the cast or say the show sucks or anything like that, but still it's kind of like, hey, like awkward situation, like I'm hosting and I actually was hired and I got fired, because there's people who are going to be tuning in that might not know the situation, right? So I think there's that's why I think it's going to be very much like watching someone walk on a tightrope. I'm really excited for that, you know, 8 to 10 minutes they give him to just kind of introduce himself to everyone, and I think he will definitely address it, but I still think it'll be a very funny and fascinating monologue.
Is there a chance? Because like I know how fickle, and I'm saying individually, but as a group, we are in the SNL community. Is there a chance that Shane Gillis does such a good job as an SNL host that people are like, we got to bring Shane Gillis back? Like, is it possible he does the complete 180, and then year after year we're like, remember when Shane Gillis hosted Saturday Night Live? That was a good host. Anybody?
I think that's totally possible. Like I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think for, you know, for some people, you know, it won't move the needle, but I think if people go into it with maybe more of an open mind, and he does well, I think ultimately if people do well on the show, we'd want to see them again.
Yeah, I think everyone likes a good comeback story. If he's like sincere and like it's a good show and like the vibes are good, I think that'd be very interesting. I think that'd be a lot of fun. It's possible.
Yeah, I think same thing. I mean, honestly, for him, best case scenario is he does a great job and people are clamoring for him and he doesn't come back. He just kind of gets to have like a, Sandler-esque, like I'm here, I knock out of the park, and then you might not see me again for a while kind of performance. I think that's probably best for him, but I'm looking forward to see how it goes.
I cannot wait to see what's going to happen with this. Look, I think we all enjoy a little bit of chaos. So as long as everybody's like happy and comfortable, I think we could let's see what's going to happen here. So I'm looking forward to it. Fred, Will, it's great to talk to you both. So I just want to, before we wrap up with the two of you,
as well.
I'll give you last thoughts and anything from the season you want to talk about. So Will, anything else from the season you want to mention?
I'm just really excited to see I guess we are starting the second half of the season, but I am really excited to see what kind of momentum is built, what kind of hosts are in store for the last part of the season. And, I still think that every year, we talk about sports analogies. There's times during every year where someone hasn't kind of risen to the top of the rankings that we're talking about. And I'm excited to see who builds that momentum going into the last part of the season into season 50. I think someone that we're probably not talking about as much right now is going to have a pretty crazy run here in the last part, these last couple months of the season.
They got 9 episodes to do it, so we shall see. Fred, anything else from the season you want to talk about?
Oh, is it only 9? Wow. I mean, I'm feeling good about it too. I think as long as you avoid your occasional acting class or something, I think it could still end up being a very strong season. So I'm really excited to see what's to come.
Absolutely. Yeah. As much as we are talking about the things that we think the show could be doing better, any Saturday Night Live is fun.
Yeah.
So we're excited to be in it, and we're going to, whatever dip we will get, we'll come back up eventually. So thank you, Will. Thank you, Fred. Great to chat with you both, and looking forward to speaking to you next time.
Awesome.
Thanks, John. Good to see you, Sammy. You guys take care.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. All right, Sammy, we got some more questions to get into here. So I'm looking forward to getting into anyone we haven't answered yet. Let me take this question from @PaigeGoldstein1107, who asked, do you prefer recurring sketches? That was the question. So I guess recurring sketches versus non-recurring sketches. We get the question a lot. So what do you think, Sammy? What's your take on that?
Prefer recurring versus non-recurring. It depends, right? Because I do like the familiarity of the game of a sketch, and maybe I like a certain cast member's performance as a character, so it's fun to see them and how they are able to change it up. But ultimately, I'm looking for the next kind of one and done sort of you get this sketch and they kind of did everything with it. And, it becomes kind of a new classic versus with a recurring character. A lot of times, if you do it X amount of times, it kind of, it kind of all, blends together in your brain, and you can't really remember, this iteration was good, this one was bad. But I definitely would like to see more recurring characters on the show. I think there's, like all things in life, there's a balance to it.
I prefer recurring characters to recurring sketches. Unless you're going to develop a world. Yeah, unless you're going to develop a world that we really build out, which is really not what the show is anymore. I think if you go back to the original era of the show, one of my favorite sketches in the entire history of Saturday Night Live was the Olympia Cafe sketches, where there was always a storyline that was happening from sketch to sketch. But that's not the world of Saturday Night Live anymore, where things are just so cut up and seen online and not, built in succession. So for me, I generally would say instead of sketch types, I would rather see characters be put in different situations. And that's one of the JS rules that I look for. So hopefully
can I give a bit of a hot take follow-up on that?
Sure.
Kind of in recent years, especially, have hated recurring sketch types, because a lot of times maybe I feel like my memory is bad, and I'm almost I feel like I'm being gaslit into thinking it's an original sketch or that I haven't seen it before. And
if
then,
you can't remember, then the audience, like general people, cannot remember.
right, and maybe that's like what they're hoping for. But a lot of times, and maybe I'll be on the round or I'll be on the hot take show or whatever, and it's like you'll be like, oh yeah, they did this like 2 or 3 seasons ago, and I'm like, I literally have no memory because it's like not a most of the time it's like such like an easy kind of thing you can like switch out the variables. And yeah, I don't remember they did this game show 2 or 3 times, and it feels like it's just like the same thing kind of regurgitated over again. So yeah, that's my rant on that.
Well, Sammy, I know a guy who has a very strong opinion on this, I'm sure. So let's bring in our old friend, Casey Killingsworth, to the podcast tonight.
Casey,
Hey,
talk
what's up,
about-
guys?
Hello,
up?
Casey. How are you?
I'm great. It's been a minute. How have you guys been?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Miss talking to you,
good.
buddy. Like, it's great to have you
Yeah.
on the show, and I know you have a lot of great takes. So I know you've been listening to
Yeah.
this conversation. So maybe we'll get you to answer the question and then hear your thoughts on the season, and we'll talk through some of the other things we've discussed tonight. We have a few more questions to get to as well. So first time on the show with us in a long time, so I'm happy to give you some time to talk through everything. So what did you think of that last question? Recurring sketches, recurring characters, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're kind of past the era of recurring characters, and we're more into the era of just, recurring templates, recurring sketch tropes.
Boo.
I mean, if well, I mean, if the recurring characters we're getting are like Lisa from Temecula, which I wasn't crazy about for a number of reasons. I love Ego Woden normally, but not a fan of Lisa's. I think they need to figure. I'm not against recurring characters, but I think they need to figure out a new way to make reoccurring characters work in going into season 50. And
But Casey, let me ask you, would you have liked Lisa from Temecula more if the second time, like Lisa from Temecula and like her friend played by Punky were like going to like the hairdresser or something like that, as an example? Like they weren't like sitting at a restaurant table?
yeah, different settings work, different changes work. I mean, as long as they're not as like, cut and paste and drag and drop as they were in like season 35, I'm all for recurring characters if they can change the setting each time and just change the rote formula that they're in. Yeah, just you can keep using characters as long as you use them in different formulas and settings. That's well, I hesitate to call it this for lack of a better term, but that's a CK rule. That's one of the rules I go by.
How are you feeling about season 49 as a whole right now?
Well, first of all, I know you guys are doing this new format with the patron feedback shows. I'm sure the writer strike and the greatest cast member countdown influenced that heavily. And I haven't been here in a while just because I want to give myself a break because the last few months I've been starting a new job and trying to make some other changes in my life. But I told myself I'm going to wait until I have something, new and interesting to say about the season that I haven't already talked about in my blogs. And I signed up for this one thinking, oh, Ayo Edebiri, she's gonna be a host. It'll give me something interesting to say. The whole internet's been clamoring for her to do SNL. We all have been. She's someone with the actual, comedy experience that the show sorely needs right now. And yeah, well, leading into Ayo, I feel like as a whole, what we're seeing in season 49 is a lot less of what we saw in season 48 in terms of seeing the show. Last year we saw the show experiment and try new things and establish new people, just trying to get their foothold into just new uncharted territory. And that season started off a little rocky, but you could tell with like Brendan Gleeson and Megan Thee Stallion, they were experimenting. Sometimes it worked, like with Brendan. Sometimes it didn't work, like with Megan. And then the show was finally on steady ground in that December, January run. And then February, March got a little shaky leading into the strike. And we're seeing, I feel like we saw glimpses of the show trying new things. Sometimes it just worked that week, like in Bad Bunny. Sometimes it worked and they were doing things that they should have kept doing because they could have sustained the show, like with Nate Bargatze and some Driver and Chalamet's episodes. But overall, season 49, I feel like we're seeing a lot less of that 48 experimentation, and we're seeing a lot more. I don't want to say shameless, but just pop culture pandering in general. It was all over the Pete episode. It's just, they're not taking enough new chances and doing new things for my liking. And but this season, yeah, since the new year started, 2024, I feel like we're like past the era where they're doing, any experimentation of the show's benefit. And I feel like that pandering's gotten to the point, like our friend Blood Meridian said, that seems a little bit reminiscent of the, like, 20 years ago, the late Tina Fey era, the mid 2000s, season 29, 30, some of 31, maybe some of 28, but yeah, that era. Which,
huge difference there, Casey, which is that, like, Tina's talked about this a lot, which is that pop culture at the time was all people wanted to hear about, given what happened with 9/11 and then the Iraq War and stuff like that. It was like there was so much going on that they felt like the comedy needed to be in what was happening in, like, less serious things in the world. So there was that. And I don't know that there is a legit reason for the leaning on pop culture now versus what it was then.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're in that exact same place because the show feels like, okay, maybe people would rather hear about Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce, Barbie, Oppenheimer than they would about what's going on in the Middle East, or if we have any. I don't think people are going to want to hear our takes on Biden, other than that he's just old. Or, I mean, if people do want to hear about politics, they're going to want to hear about Trump because he's going through a criminal trial right now. And we can even inject pop culture into that to make it palatable to our audience. So, yeah, I think it's just the new version of that. And, and that shows, like, their hosting choices, like in the new year, Jacob Elordi, Dakota Johnson, just very of the moment, pop culture savvy hosts who aren't quite the right fit for the show. And one of them more than successfully proved that almost a decade ago. But again, Ayo Edebiri, she's a perfect fit for the show. She's done sketch comedy. She's done stand-up. She's done independent film. She can handle anything the show throws at her. And she, as a host, did a very solid job. And one of the best hosts of the season. It's just
I think she was the best host of the season.
Exactly. She was the best host of the season. It's just unfortunate that her episode kind of got marred by discourse that had nothing to do with her performance. I mean, yeah, she was strong, but she kind of accidentally hung a lampshade on the show, kind of falling back on just outside of pop culture, just, sketch tropes and premises that were kind of tired and maybe worked once, but now they need to think of something new. And of course, it is not her fault that the show suddenly decided to book Nikki Haley in the same episode as her and force them to interact, which, regardless of what she said, she is a politician, either Democrat or Republican. I think we are also way past the era that politicians of any stripe need to be on SNL as themselves for any reason, because we all saw what happened the last time the show, decided to platform a major presidential candidate. And so the Nikki Haley thing is not her fault, and it's certainly not her fault that the show decided to book Shane Gillis for whatever reason in the next episode after her. And I do have to throw in my 2 cents on Mr. Gillis, because it was the most dumbfounding thing in the world to hear, first of all, but I've thought about it, and my personal take on Shane Gillis is, I've seen some of his stand-up clips of it, and they haven't made me think they haven't made me want to check out a whole special of him. So while I'm not crazy about his stand-up, I've seen some of those Gilly and Keeve sketches, and they weren't terrible. I mean, I liked them, but they didn't exactly blow me away. There's one that actually made me laugh that I won't mention, but I did see that he does do a decent Trump impression. Not as good as JAJ, but a lot better than Alec Baldwin, and that does.
Casey, can I just jump in and ask you something about the Shane Gillis, which is that I think we discussed this in our patron Discord a little bit, but I don't know if I heard how you felt about my take. And Sammy, I want your opinion on this too, which was I think that he had Jason Sudeikis upside. Like just in terms of everything I saw from him, I think his ceiling, like the best case scenario, if he was a cast member on the show, was he could pull off Sudeikis-like things. Maybe his worst case scenario is he's more like a Rob Riggle type, like that's his floor. But like, do you think those are like interesting comps? Like he could have been as good as Jason. He could have been maybe as like mediocre as Rob Riggle.
I think I didn't hear that take. I think that's fascinating because I didn't really think about that. I mean, I feel like we've talked a lot about how we are missing, that kind of Sudeikis type of cast member. And I really do feel like now that you point that out, that he totally could have done that. It would have been interesting to see, like I could see him playing like a type of dad in a sketch, and I feel like we get that with JJ now, but like they're different kinds of dads. Like we're not getting, the kind of, stern, more gruff kind of looking character, from a JJ that we would from a Shane Gillis. And I do actually think, because they both do such good Trump impressions in this alternate universe, would we be having JJ play Trump now? I mean, ultimately, I think his Trump impression is better, but if Shane Gillis had come in first.
I don't think they would have hired JJ.
Even for Biden?
I think they hired him for Trump, right? Didn't they hire him for Trump when they found him on TikTok or whatever it was? Like someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they needed a Trump that wasn't Baldwin. Right. And if they already had one on the cast, maybe they don't
but
hire
didn't he
JJ.
Play Biden in his first episode? Or did he play Trump?
He did play Biden in his first episode, but I feel that I think that came together pretty last minute.
Right. Well, yeah, there you go. Yeah. So I do think, that there's a lot to think about, but going back to your original question, I think that's actually a very good comp. I think I would honestly lean more towards, from what I've seen of him, the Sudeikis side than the Rob Riggle side of things.
What do you think, Casey?
I can't say that I see Shane Gillis having that Jason Sudeikis, likability quality. I feel like he has too much of this, edgy frat boy edgelord thing. He's a little bit too much of an edgelord to have that wide Sudeikis, Midwestern lovable smartass appeal that he had. I do see him more as a Rob Riggle type. I mean, those Gilly and Keefe sketches, I feel like those in the alternate universe that he joined the cast of SNL, those would have been just failed pitches that didn't make it out of the room on Monday or out of the table read on Wednesday. I don't know if his, sensibility would have clashed. I feel like his sensibility would have clashed with SNL, and he maybe would have lasted one season at best. And that leads me into a question that I wanted to pose to you specifically, Mr. Schneider. It's kind of the whole reason I signed up to be on this again. But I'll just add that I feel like he must have included his Trump impression in his audition, and my theory is that maybe Alec Baldwin was really playing hardball and negotiating with Lauren in season 45. Maybe Baldwin just really didn't want to do it for even another year. So they hired Gillis thinking, okay, he could be our backup Trump. And then it all just backfired. We know what happened there. So they really had to cave to give Baldwin whatever he wanted to come back. But the question I want to pose to you, John, as someone with probably more connections inside the show than any of us here is, I've seen our friends Andrew Dick and Blood Meridian. I've seen them, tweet this take that I personally agree with. I feel the show is having an identity crisis. I feel like say what you will about the era when Baldwin did play Trump. You watched it, love it or hate it, and you would think, well, this is a show that knows its audience and who it wants its audience to be, and what side of the culture war, what side of history it's on. But now I feel like the show, I don't want to say they've forgotten who they want their audience to be, or they just don't know they want their audience to be. I feel like they're chasing a new audience, a more wide general audience than ever. I feel like they're chasing an audience that would not be interested in the show otherwise if they hadn't put Shane Gillis to host. Like the type of audience that wouldn't be really into any portrayal of Trump, but the type of audience that would say, "Oh, it hasn't been funny since the days of Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, Will Ferrell." Yeah, they're chasing that audience. I think they're trying to get them back for just the nostalgia of season 50, maybe. But those people would probably just, watch Shane's episode online and be like, yeah, and be done with it. So I just want to know, John, do you agree with the take that the show is, in an identity crisis and, really, needs to figure out who they want their audience to be? Just, who do they want their fan base to be outside of the general public? Do you think the show is having an identity crisis with the decisions it's been making really recently?
Yeah, I don't know that so it's a nuanced question, and I appreciate the question. I don't think that I think if you were to ask a lot of people who work at the show, I think they go to work every week, they think they put on a great show, and they're very happy, and then they go home and they start things. The next bus comes around the next week. Like, I don't think they think about that. For people like Eric Kenward and Steve Higgins and Lorne Michaels, and then the big brass up top who needs to reevaluate after every season, do they feel like the show is having an identity crisis? I think there's a possibility of that. I wouldn't necessarily attribute it to anything that's happening on a day-to-day basis with the cast or with the hosts, because that's something that's more front-facing that we see as fans. I think where they may be feeling the show has an identity crisis is that the show was created in 1975 for people to watch once on a Saturday night, and that's it. And then eventually things got repeated on Comedy Central, and the websites and the blogs of the world that started when the internet started up would start documenting everything that happened in the history of the show. And then the show got so meta that the head of the snake started eating the tail, and you get the Five Timers Club and all this stuff because that the fans cared about that. So that was like level 2. And now they're in level 3, where like over like 50% of the American population does not own like a television. So like they're playing a game in a world that is antiquated. So they're trying to figure out how to keep the show alive in the future. They care way more about how does Saturday Night Live exist in the future than they care about should they, hire this cast member or that cast member. So for them, they're like, okay, we need to produce the show in a way that people are talking about Saturday Night Live on a day-to-day basis after the episode ends. And the only way to do that is to create very, short segments of funny stuff that can exist on the internet. So I just think that the show is being produced in a way that it wasn't 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50 years ago. It's such a different show that I think they're still wrapping their heads around what does Saturday night look like in a postmodern world. So I think, when you ask the question about like Andrew and Blood and all these people, like, I think that sometimes the focus on the identity crisis has more to do with the writing style of the writers or the hosts that are being booked or the cast members. And I truly don't believe the production of the show feels that they have an identity crisis when it comes to them. I think they're just still trying to figure out how to make the show work in the future.
Yeah, I agree with that take. And I didn't even think about how, like, the fact that we're no longer in the era of linear broadcast TV being the king of all media anymore. I feel like we are in the era where this is something, our friend Ruby said, and, her and Andrew have been talking about this. They said, like, in the past 5 years, they have been, even though it's a TV show full of sketches, they've been just writing and producing sketches just based on what would get the most clicks on YouTube and then front loading the show with that. And that's been like mostly political pop culture stuff. And that doesn't translate well into the, rundown of a live show that's supposed to be keeping you awake and engaged as you're watching it in real time on television. Like the show needs to balance out its energy more. Like they were saying, like Ruby said, they can't open with like a 10-15 minute political debate sketch and then just more trend chasing stuff takes up the first half hour. Just take the sketches that just have the most energy, get the best response from the audience, have the best, take whatever just pops on camera and just make that the cold open. Just make the cold open shorter. Just whatever just
Right, but
pops has the
they
most
don't
energy. That should
they're
be the
not
cold
listening
open.
to the hot take show at 1 a.m. and they're not like, like John says the cold open needs to be shorter, so we're gonna make it short. Like what they're thinking is, okay, millions of people who did not watch Saturday Night Live for the last 4 years are gonna tune in because they want to see our take on the Trump v. Biden debate. And they haven't watched, they don't care, but they're like, oh, SNL during debates, we remember back in the day with Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase. Okay, let's tune in for the first time in 10 years and see what Saturday Night Live is going to say about this. So they're going to do it because of that. So it's almost like it's like the antithesis of what I was just saying, which is like when season 50 comes around next year, they're like almost reverting back to an ancestral time when people actually watch television. So I just think for them, they're like trying to figure out how to like make this all work. Sammy, I gotta get your thoughts on this.
There's so much to talk about. I mean, going back to the cold open stuff. I mean, I've honestly been like kind of surprised by how they're handling the political stuff this year. Like we haven't really, and maybe we like haven't really gotten into all the stuff with the election yet, but they're kind of like zigging and zagging on certain things. I mean, the cold open with the Republican debate sketch, like it was kind of like not like they were trolling the audience, but like you thought you're going to get a certain type of sketch and then you didn't. You get kind of Trump come in, and obviously like we've seen Trump do these cold opens so many times, but I think from that standpoint, I'm not saying they're listening, but I do feel like I don't think the cold opens have been amazing this season. I think they have been, they've been shorter. I can say that. And then ultimately, yeah, it is a fascinating question with how SNL adapts. There's a realistic possibility that SNL cannot be on NBC in a couple of years. It could be moved to Peacock, or it could be moved to like any sort of streaming service. So I don't think that's like so crazy. I know like a couple months ago there's articles about how like NBC was considering like gutting late night a little bit. So how does that impact SNL? So I think ultimately SNL is such a strong brand that even if like linear TV and late night TV on linear TV somehow gets dismantled in the next couple of years, like SNL is going to survive because it's such a huge brand. And it's really like the only thing from 1975 that is still like doing super well, like on like mainstream television. Like it's still continues to pick up new fans and everything like that. So yeah, I don't know, I really do think they are sort of just scratching their heads on that sort of thing. It's almost like an impossible question to answer,
Right. And then the other factor, Sammy, is that the vultures are coming, because if you don't think that Netflix is trying to think of a way to have a live sketch comedy show or even just a sketch comedy show in the future, they're going to work on it. I mean, I believe that they were testing the waters with the Chris Rock special where they had the fly on the wall guys and they had like a pregame and a postgame show there. Like whatever the future of sketch comedy is, it's going to happen on streaming services, whether SNL stays on NBC or not, in addition to that. So
yeah,
I think like, Lorne staying in power right now is like it's almost comparable to like a game of war that you see where you have like a head of a country, and as soon as like their regime falls, like all the other countries try and attack their land. And like I believe that the competitors are thinking about how do I capitalize on a market that is untapped here. So I think SNL is in a precarious position in the next few years to figure out what the succession plan is that makes the most sense, and how do we expand SNL in a way that they can't be taken over. Like, how do we get them? Are we on Peacock and NBC? Is there SNL in the UK like was previously announced? Do they start expanding globally? Like, there's a lot of things to think about here.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Keenan said this in an interview that if Lauren does leave after season 50, and the NBC just decides to continue the show without him rather than just ending it there, it will be interesting to see if they try to restructure the show without Lauren. Like, okay, Lauren's gone. This old dinosaur is not attached to what it once was. Let's try to restructure the whole brand, not the show, but the brand, and figure out how can we make this compete with TikTok. In fact, I heard TikTok was trying its own live sketch comedy show that I don't think anyone ever saw or heard of again. But yeah, that is an interesting discussion, and it'll only be like another year and a half, 2 years till we see where that goes. So it'd be, you know, fascinating. It is amazing that not the show, but the brand is, lasted 50 years without really changing its format, just most of the personnel throughout those decades. And, as far as like the political material heading into season 50, I mean, as someone in the chat said, maybe SNL has a cast will be another useful handle to have on social media. And, as long as SNL does stick to its current cast with the debate sketches, I'd be fine with whatever they do. Like, if another, Trump versus Biden debate sketch in 2024, that in October this year, I'd rather see just a Mikey Day versus James Austin Johnson version of that than another, Kerry versus Baldwin. I think hopefully we're past the era of just big, movie star, celebrity outside of the cast cameos for big political roles because of the political circus that's going on right now.
Agreed. Casey, I love when you come on with us because we get to have these great conversations. So I sincerely want to thank you for joining us tonight and sharing your thoughts and asking these really interesting questions. So please come back another time with us. Sign up for more shows. Could love to have you on, and would love if you could just tell the listeners where they could check out your blog so they get to hear from you every single week.
Yeah, and I'll also just add the last word on Shane Gillis. Like, what I'll go into that show expecting is, like, I'm going to expect another show like, Chappelle or Bill Burr. And, Bill Burr is a guy I respect because I may not agree with everything he said in his monologue, but I respect him for the way he said it, and just the way he, respected his audience and handled that crowd. But yeah, I'm going to go in expecting a show where the monologue's really dicey, but the sketches are just fine because he'll be working with a cast and crew that actually does like him enough and respect his sketch work to make him want to look good and endear him to whatever remaining viewers are left who are willing to give him a fair shake and see how he does and see why they thought this man should host after being fired after 4 days before even getting on the air. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say. So you can, my blog is on blogspot.com. It's not on WordPress. It's not fancy. It's just a homemade blog that I'm maintaining for the past decade. And I post links to it in your Discord, John, and in the That Week in SNL Discord, and on Twitter/X, and also Threads and Blue Sky. So all my socials except Instagram and Facebook, because I would want to read it there. But yeah, if you follow me on social media, I'll tweet links to my my blog every Sunday night just as soon as I finish writing it and publishing it. And yeah, thank you for having me back. It's great to be back, and I love getting to be here, and I'd love to do it again sometime soon.
Absolutely. We look forward to it, Casey. So thanks for joining us.
See you, Casey.
All right, Sammy K. Let's get into our last few questions. We'll do some rapid fire on these last few questions, and then we'll wrap up our night tonight. So thanks to all the patrons for joining us. If you want to be on the podcast, like Will, like Fred, like Casey, you got to sign up. Patreon.com/the SNL Network. We'll put out a form. You got to sign up and join us because it's so much fun getting to meet all the listeners. Okay, Sammy, let's take this next question from @Dan Sperano, who says, any reason why we haven't had, or we went a few weeks without a PDD sketch? Then the Elordi one was cut for time. I know we also had a cut for time sketch from the last episode with PDD that we never ended up seeing. So what do you attribute to this lack of PDD in 2024 and even at the end of 2023?
Yeah, honestly, when I saw this question, my first thought was, I wonder if SNL and Lorne was prioritizing the airtime of the PDD shorts to time it around the movie. You know, the movie was, you know, starting to be promoted in October, November, and it came out in November. And then, you know, after that, it was, you know, kind of, you know, how things go at SNL where, you know, things get cut if, you know, the producers think something else is going to work. So I think that's part of it. I also think I kind of speculated earlier in the season that they were getting a lot less live shows on onto the show because they were having a pre-tape every week. So I wonder if, you know, that in combination with the fact that they weren't promoting a movie, maybe, you know, they wanted to focus a little bit more on, you know, getting some stuff, some live sketches on there. But honestly, I'm not entirely sure. That could all just be speculation. It is speculation.
Yeah, I'm very surprised about this because I think not only have the shorts been fantastic, like we really haven't had a bad one, but also like if you're not going to put them online, why are you pushing them so much? So like, I don't mind if they got a cut for time short, because again, like goes back to my conversation about the show, which is that I think they care about, you know, posting these things online and making sure that a lot of people see them. But I am just like absolutely dumbfounded as to why, and I'm sure there's a very logical reason, but I don't know what it is, why they didn't post the previous PDD short from the Ayo episode.
Yeah. Doesn't make any sense. I was really excited when I heard about that and figured that was kind of a slam dunk during this break, you know, posted and, you know,
I mean, it may still go up. Like maybe they wanted to, like during the long break, the 2-week break, they were like, oh, we can have like more content. That'd be good to post. So we'll post this at some point. But also it's weird because if like Ayo is in the pre-tape, it's more relevant to her episode. So yeah,
Right.
I don't know about that one. I'm sure I'll find out, but yeah, that's weird to me. I don't know that I have a very good reason to answer this listener's question, Dan, but I just don't. I think that SNL should try and include them as much as possible because they're really good.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Next question is from Victor, who's in the chat with us tonight. Victor asks, just a simple one, favorite sketches from the season so far. So do you have, and he also says, love the podcast, keep up the great work. So thank you, Victor. Questions about your favorite sketch from the season, Sammy?
I wrote down a couple, but I'm only I'll name a few. I don't want to hog them all.
Okay.
I have Question Quest from the Emma Stone episode. Obviously, you know, love to see Michael Longfellow get, you know, a starring role in the sketch. Orphan Annie from the Chalamet episode. Got a shout out Trost from my fantasy team. And then I honestly thought I'm Just Pete was like a very good pre-tape. So fun. As much as like we were talking about earlier about like SNL tackling pop culture things too much. Like they had to do something with Barbie. And like, I think that was the perfect way coming off of the strike and, you know, the long break to kind of bring that all in. So those are just a few.
Yeah, I love Beep Beep. I talked about that with Andrew Dismukes. I also thought that Pongo was such a great pre-tape that we got. That one was really great. From this last run, I think that do we have a great sketch from these last 3 episodes?
Yeah, the Ayo sketch where
School
she
hypnotist?
plays the little school hypnotist. I think that's a great sketch.
Yeah, Washington's Dream. I also really love too. Thanks, Demi, in the chat brought that one up.
Yeah.
But yes, I think I said this during the Patreon SNN sketch breakdown. You can also listen to that on Patreon. I think that was a fantastic sketch, like 10 out of 10 sketch, right up until the point that they started singing No Air.
I agree. I said the same thing when we talked on the Hot Take show. That was like such. It was unfortunate because I don't think it definitely didn't ruin the sketch for me at all. Like I still think it's really great, but You
I was
know,
like dancing in the street, like watching that sketch and being like, yes, everything I ever wanted. And then I just got like hit by a car. Like, I'm like, why?
yeah, I don't. I don't think SNL always needs to have like an amazing ending. Like, you know, a lot of sketch shows like don't, end their sketches. They just kind of move on to the next thing. But I think that was actively not a good way to end that sketch.
Yes. Oh, bowling pins and home videos, the two Stephen Castillo sketches, also fantastic sketches from the last
Yeah.
few. So we got some bits and pieces the last few weeks. Okay,
Yeah.
this one comes from our friend Eric Gotting. Eric says, how important is the order of sketches in terms of how conventional the sketch is and the quality of sketches / like where to put the pre-tape and stuff? So this is a two-part question. So first, Sammy, how important is the order of sketches for you generally when you're watching SNL?
As someone that watches the show live and tries to watch the show live as much as possible, I think it's super important to have the sketches, be in order that flows together and makes sense. Like, I don't think it's just like a playlist where you can just kind of, put things on shuffle. I think they do put in a lot of thought and time into sketch placement. And I do wonder sometimes, why the first sketch in the night isn't the best sketch. Like, I think ultimately you should kind of try to start off really strong. And I feel like that isn't always the case. So if we ever get somebody on the show who's involved in those decisions to, come on SNL Stories, that would be my number one question to ask is, that kind of placement decision.
So Eric gave us an exercise. Eric said, for a fun exercise, how would you order 2 4-star, 2 3-star, and 2 2-star sketches? So you have 6 sketches, 2 are 4-star, 2 are 3-star, 2 are 2-star. How would you order those sketches?
That is such an interesting question.
Do you want me to go first?
I mean, I think you start with 4-star. Like, I think you have to start with a 4-star sketch, and then I would do a 3-star sketch. Honestly, I think, have a stinker towards the end of the night. So maybe have one of your 2 stars in there. Maybe spread those out, spread the wealth, and have it the 2-star before we can update as well. And then I don't know. I guess this is like a boring way to answer it, but you're kind of just. I think you start off strong and you kind of layer everything else in after that.
I think you bookend. I think you put your 4-star sketches on the either side. I think you put your 3-star sketches there, and then the 2-star sketches in the middle. If you knew that's what you were getting. So, yeah. I would go 4 3 2 2 3 4.
Yeah.
But yes, it does matter to me. That is one of my favorite things to talk about, sketch placement. So yeah, I do care about that, Eric. Okay, Ken George Jones, who's been in the chat with us all night, asks, given that in Ken's opinion, most of the Trump pieces this season have generated apathy, or in the case of Nikki Haley's appearance, widespread derision, little is being done with Mikey's Biden impression, and both candidates are very unpopular with the public. And there are doubts that Biden and Trump will even debate. Do you think SNL will cut down on election coverage, or is this something you feel that the show has to do due to reputation, expectations, ratings, what have you? So what do you think of that?
That is interesting. I mean, I was going to bring this up when Casey was talking about the political stuff, but I just feel like SNL should be doing stuff about politics. No matter, I think it is in the DNA of the show, going back all the way to the election in 1976 to do debate sketches. And I think ultimately, if they were funnier, people wouldn't be complaining about them as much. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think maybe it is just kind of harder to parody, especially Trump. We know it's hard to parody him, but I think JJ's Trump is really strong. And I liked what we saw from Mikey's Biden. So I would like to see them, have a traditional debate sketch, even if they don't debate. I think that is a funny premise for a sketch. But I think ultimately I don't know. I don't know if they will debate, but I would like to see SNL continue in the tradition. So you can always go back and see where we were as a country when, things were happening over the last 50 years. It's a time capsule.
Yeah, I agree. I do like debates. I think they should do them even if they don't actually debate. When we had Don Roy King on our show in season 46, he was the director of Saturday Night Live at the time. And one of the conversations we had with him on that podcast, if you go back and listen to it, was about how I asked him, like, or one of us asked him, why when a sketch is over does he fade to black and not pan out so you can see the set and the audience after a sketch? And he was like, that is a great question. I'm not really sure. I know we used to do it. Let me think about it. And then I noticed that they started doing it a little bit more. And I'm not saying it was us. It could have been a bunch of other things, but I'm just saying sometimes I feel like the show needs to be reminded of things that they did well in the past. And one of those things that they used to do really well in the past that I would love to remind somebody at the show is take political figures and place them in situations so you can create storylines. And for me, like, I always loved like knowing like who's in the cabinet of the president, you know, who's the vice president, knowing their families, like learning about the kids of the president or the grandkids or the wife or the husband or first lady, first gentleman, whatever it is. You know, I love getting to know everybody in the administration. I also loved getting to see like Dan Aykroyd's Richard Nixon do crazy things, you know, like the idea that the SNL just has to take the news of the day and then find a funny take on it is only one layer deep compared to what they could do, which is take an interesting news story and then create a fake situation in which to put that character and then create a sketch from there. And I still think that like they have that in them, and I'm hoping they get there.
I agree. That's a great point.
Okay. That does it for questions tonight. I appreciate the questions and the conversation. I think this was one of the best feedback shows we've ever done. It was great to I think we all needed this therapy a little bit to talk through things as a family. So I appreciate it. If you do enjoy the show, let us know. Give us a thumbs up on the video. You can comment. You can always write to us on social media. I want to shout out this review we just got on Apple Podcasts, which you can always leave us a review and I'll try and read them on the show. So this one came in from MN Doggy 68, who says that we are the go-to for SNL fans. So thank you so much. This is the place for all the fans out there. The SNN dives deeper than you thought was possible. In addition to their coverage of current episodes, they do special series and shows about the past and really get into the history of the show. There isn't much they don't know. Well, that's not true, but I appreciate that. This is an amazing companion to the show and a must listen for any fans of Saturday Night Live. So thank you for the very nice review. That is really thoughtful.
Nice.
Yeah, really thoughtful. So thank you so much for that. And I really do appreciate the support here. So that's nice because I'm having fun. No matter how the season is, good or bad, I'm having a great time covering it. So I'm so excited to jump back in. We're going to have another show on Monday. So look to our social media for that show coming up when we start promoting that. And then, of course, we'll be back to cover Shane Gillis in totality and musical guest 21 Savage with the Hot Take Show, Roundtable, and By the Numbers. So, Sammy, thanks for joining us.
John, thanks for having me. Should I do my plugs now?
Of course, go for it.
Yeah. All right. You guys can find me at ThatSammyK on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can always find me here at the SNN. Check out the Superfan takeovers as always. I've also been kind of all over the SNN recently with the Ayo Hot Take Show and the By the Numbers show recently. And I'm also about to be appearing on the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. I'm not sure if the episode has been announced yet, so I'm not going to say who it is. I don't know if I'm allowed to, but I'll say it's a writer. We're talking about a writer on that episode of the SNL Hall of Fame. So I know John is, he's thinking about who it could be, but you. I didn't know you could do that. I thought you actually did that in real life right now.
You thought that was actually happening in my room?
Yeah, I thought. Yeah, it's been a long day, but yeah, guys, definitely check that out. And thanks for having me as always.
Absolutely. I look forward to seeing that show as well, Sammy. So yeah, if you want to give us a follow on social media, you can do so. Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify to never miss a show that we have going on here at the SNN. And thank you for all the listeners who gave me their well wishes when I was a little sick last week. So I appreciate it. And thank you for all the patrons for their continued support and everybody who joined us on the show tonight, including Casey, Fred, and Will. All right. On behalf of Sammy K, my name is Jon Schneider from the SNN. We will see you next time, everybody. Have a good